All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Excess Exceed, the show where Gearface lays traps to catch experts uh, to teach him about new and exciting Exceed characters. Today, we are learning about the big man, Waldstein. I'm very, very excited, not only to learn about Waldstein, but also to have Shizzy Mac on the show as my resident victim slash expert today. Mac, thank you so much for agreeing to be on the show.
Absolutely, man. Absolute pleasure. I cannot wait to show the world how to play the biggest boy as great as possible.
I will do my best to make sure that you don't regret your decision to be on the show by the end of it. That's my only hope. Um, Quick disclaimer before we get started, as always, we talk about playing to win on this show. If that is not how you like to play, that's fine and cool. And honestly, you should play the way that you do like to play. Not only will you have more fun that way, you'll play longer. That means you'll get better by the end of it. So if what we're talking about doesn't sound fun to you, play in the way that does sound fun to you. The other thing is that we tend to talk on this show in kind of prescriptive terms about strategy. You might hear us say, "Oh, that's always a mistake," or "Never do this," or "Always do that," or "This is always the right play." Take all that with a grain of salt. Mac is an informed opinion on this character, but he's only one opinion. I think that season six characters in general tend to be a little bit divisive and controversial, and maybe a little bit underdeveloped. There's always a possibility. I think. I mean, in my case, a definite. I'm not an expert that we have undervalued something in the kit, or we have read something wrong. And I want to hear if you think that we did um, uh, evaluate Waldstein wrong in some way. I want to hear about that. So take our opinion with a grain of salt. This is just a guide. But yeah, with all that said, Mac, tell me about the big man.
All right. The first thing that I always want to start out with Waldstein is his front side character ability, because that is what you'll be using for a good part of the early game. It is like most season six, but not all of them. It's an action that you use on your turn, and it gives your attack an extra quality or boost. Uh, his is on hit. You can push or pull the opponent one. This is really, really good, even if it's only just an action on your turn. This character ability has lets him win trades that you wouldn't normally. If you're at max range and you throw a sweep down against your opponent and they throw a sweep, you're not going to break them, but you can push them one out and they're going to completely waste their move and miss. Uh,
Right.
Obviously, it still loses to things like focus. And it's not going to save you from every attack. Wallstein is a rather slow character. His special moves cop out at 4 and his fastest ultra is 5. But the few
Right.
times that you do get to use it to dodge an ability is great, and most of the time you're pretty tanky with your moves. You're pretty much ungraspable on all of your specials, so even if it's just setting up the next turn and keeping your opponent out of their preferred range and into yours, it is just such a good ability to have.
Okay, that makes sense. And so, I mean, seeing like use cases here that I'm seeing, you've got grasp sets you all the way out to range 4, lets you
Yep.
dodge a sweep. Honestly, a lot of things that have any sort of like a cross to you could set greater movement range. You mentioned the sweep interaction just among the normals. Um, in general, and I'm sure we'll get into this as we're talking. Um, you mentioned Waldstein, this being sort of his early game ability. Is part of Waldstein's game plan that he wants to get off of front side as quickly as possible, or is this something that you actually are going to, uh, whether you want to or not, be spending a good amount of the game on this side?
You will be spending a good amount of the game on your front side here. It's a very solid ability, and Waldstein does have that issue that many characters do, where you have to choose between: do you want to spend gauge to flip him and use his ability, or do you want to use some of his ultras? Uh,
Okay,
a lot of season 6 characters, they don't really have a use for a lot of gauge. Waldstein does. He needs every little bit he can. There is no situation where he doesn't want as much gauge as humanly possible. Um, I know in season 6, when they changed the boost on focus to veil off, it gave season 6 characters access to not only a free flip, they can exceed by just playing focus, it gives them a free gauge as well, and that's a really powerful tool for someone like Waldstein, who is really gauge hungry with both his
He's
Exceed
really
side and his 3 ultra abilities, because they couldn't give him a regular suite.
right, right, right. And so, because this is going to be, a part of your ability for such a good part of the game, and it sounds like, in part because you're going to have to be, we should be evaluating these specials as though for maybe half the game or for a good chunk of the game, this push 3 could actually be push 4 for a
Yes.
lot of the game, not just something where like, all right, this is an ability that you have, but really you're playing this way.
Yeah, you
So
are gonna
as
be
we
using
evaluate,
that. Oh, I'm sorry. You're gonna be
no, no,
using
please
that
go ahead.
front side, a good amount of the time. The other thing that I like to note with his, UA, it is on hit, push or pull 1. You can stack hit triggers, so almost all, if not yeah, all of his specials, they do push or pull already. One of the
Mhm.
things I like to use for it, if you're at range 1, you can switch sides. So if you
Oh,
have
sure.
someone who
So
is,
if you're here,
Yep.
for example, yeah, yeah, okay, I gotcha. Or maybe over here.
You can start
Uh,
throwing them into the corner right from there.
right. So it's like uh, I play grasp. I use my character abilities hit effect first. I push, or rather, I pull one. Then I use grasp's hit effect to push
With
2.
2 more,
Now I got
yep,
him over here. Gotcha,
and,
gotcha, gotcha. Okay, cool.
most of his abilities, also they have push or pull 1. It's mostly Wolf and Wirbelwind, where it's just push. They hit at range 1, and those are the ones that you can't switch sides without using his character ability. The rest of them, you
Gotcha.
can still pull to switch sides, but, not Eisenregal, that hits at range 2, so disregard that.
Right.
Uh,
This gives you more distance on your positioning, but also just more fine control by trigger stacking, so you can put the person exactly where you want to.
Yes, that's it. His Wallstein does really well when he can keep enemies out of whatever range they want to be. For the rushdown characters that want to be at range 1, he can keep them at range 2 and 3 for way longer than you would like. And for the zoners, he can kind of keep pulling them in closer so they have to keep spending cards, force, and other resources to stay away from him. And
Got it.
in Exceed, I've always found that moving your opponent is a little bit more useful than moving yourself. Usually, when you have in your suite of cards, your boosts and everything, you have enough movement options for yourself already. But if you can use it to mess up your opponent's positioning specifically, it's just that much better. So I really, really like his front side ability.
Cool, that makes sense. And then one more question about his front side ability before we move on. And again, I'm sure we'll cover this in a second. So, like most season 6 characters, as you mentioned, this is an action on your turn, which means that if I played reading, for example, or a boost that caused me to strike, I can't then do this as well.
You are correct.
Um,
Yeah.
for some characters, that is a really serious consideration. For others, uh, it it doesn't matter as much as you would think it does. How often is Waldstein kind of how often can he get himself in trouble with wanting to use his character ability, but he can't because he has to use mix up or a boost that causes him to strike or something?
Really, out of all of the boosts in the season 6 normal set and what he has, the ones that I only ever use like to strike immediately is Wolf. Um, I this
Reach. Okay.
Yeah, that's the only one that I think gives you like enough of a boost to really make it worth losing that UA. And later on his flip side, it'll be the same exact thing. You're losing out on a great ability for something that still costs you some force and gives you one range. It is really good, but most of the time the UA I think is better. The only other normal is Mix Up. That one I do use a lot. Uh, Wallstein does have good movement, but sometimes you just need that one little extra one, and it's more important than moving your enemy. So you just really have to look at each situation individually and think, do I need this boost or do I need to move the opponent? And do I need this card for another purpose later on?
By default, it sounds like it's mostly going to be using his character ability.
Yeah.
And when a boost is going to be used instead, it kind of has to make the case to you that
Yep.
it's got to sell you on itself before you use it over your character ability.
The boost that you're using with your strike had better make your strike hit. Otherwise, you're doing the wrong attack, the wrong action.
Gotcha. Gotcha, gotcha. Okay, cool. That sounds good. All right, so that's his character ability. Where to next? I'll let you steer here.
All right. So I'm just going to actually go straight into his flip side because I think that is
Sure.
also extremely worth noting. I used to be one of the guys who played Waldstein, and I never really flipped him. I really liked his ultras. But then the more and more I played, the better I got. I found myself in more advantageous states where I had life leads against the opponent. And I'm like, okay, ultras here are good, but his are very specific, and if they miss, it can be a waste of gauge. Catastrophe's his most reliable one at speed 5 and power 7, but even that can get cheesed out by a lot of things. Once I started using his flip side more and more, it makes his specials so much tankier. It makes things like sweep and focus so much better. It lets your grasp do 5 damage, which is insane for a speed 7 move, and it makes his mid speeds just hit like an absolute Mack truck. So if you can get a good advantage state, build up some gauge, you can spend one as an action strike. Your attack has +2 power and +2 guard, but on cleanup, your attack seals. So miss or hit, it doesn't matter. That card is sealed away forever. I generally like to try and get through one shuffle of my deck so I don't lose options, straight away. But if you find yourself in a good situation, I've won games where I haven't even gone through half my deck because almost everything of Wallstein's hits for about 5 or 6, 7 damage. So
Right.
if you really want to push that life lead your advantage state and you can get an early flip and just keep the pressure on your opponent, I really recommend doing that too.
Okay. And so this also so this costs you a gauge, and the cleanup sealing your attack means that the attack that you played also isn't going to gauge,
Correct. It does not
right?
feed into itself.
So this is expensive
Yeah.
to keep this going. Okay. So if you are exceeding, it sounds like it's kind of when you're already winning and you're trying to prevent a comeback. Um, is Waldstein the kind of character who's going to be doing a lot of this? Is he going to be
No.
flipping back and forth, or is it pretty much like like you've exceeded and now it's just time to kill them?
Exactly. Once you've built up enough gauge and you find yourself in a good position with a good set of cards in your hand, and you just really need to finish out the game before your opponent can claw out, you flip and you stay there until you're out of gauge. Once you're out of
Okay,
gauge, you are going to want to flip back. But once you flip back to your first side, you're not going back into exceed mode. That gauge is just going to be for pure resource value for force, or to maybe get a ultra if you can build up a second one there.
you can build up enough. Okay, that
Yeah,
makes sense.
I've never really flipped back and forth with Waldstein. And I've even held focuses in my hand so I could use the veil off, so I could flip and get a gauge. It
Right.
is kind of expensive to have a flip that costs a gauge and then to spend one gauge each time you want to activate it. So you really want to make sure you have enough before you go into it.
Okay. So it's interesting that the way that you're describing this, actually, despite being able to move back and forth, and you might flip back if you have to, this actually kind of sounds, or at least the use case that you're describing, actually kind of sounds like a more traditional exceed mode, where like it's mid or late game, you need to uh, increase the pressure on your opponent.
Mm.
So you flip and kind of stay there, and you're sort of pushing a lot of your resources towards that. It's just a, kind of a different calculation about why and when it's happening based on what you have and what your opponent has.
Exactly. It's not going to be a clear cut decision each time. You do have to think about, what do I have in hand? What do they have in hand? Are my ultras worth using at this point? Do I think I'll need them? Can I possibly EX attack with one of them to spike up their, usefulness? It's really just, you have to look at the situation, see what it calls for. Um, if you spend the gauge and you flip into your exceed side and you blow through it all and they're still alive, you're just gonna have to flip back because otherwise your exceed side does nothing.
Doesn't do anything right.
Yeah.
And I'm sure as we talk about the specials again, we'll talk about what it does on both sides and use cases for both. But the +2 guard kind of needs other guard, and you mentioned that all of his specials already have that guard kind of built in to make them tankier. Like if I put +2 guard on cross or on dive, there's very little that is in the game that
Yep.
hits for 2 damage. Like, among the normals, you tend to be hit for 3, so that +2 guard is not really doing much on its own.
No, adding it
So
to a card that already has no guard is, like, such a hedge case scenario. It's really, like you
right.
said, there to be with cards that already have guard and armor, like every
Okay.
single one of his specials.
Yep, absolutely. And I mean, the mitigating factor of also being able to add +2 power to something, like, even if it's on dive that doesn't have any guard, you're like, "Okay, fine, that's cool, I'll hit for 7,
Yeah, 7 power
+2
dive
power
still
on."
breaks sweep on hit.
Yeah, that's still real good. So just because you're not getting all of the benefit out of the guard doesn't mean that you shouldn't put this on an attack, because the power is obviously beneficial as well.
Yeah, there is no situation where you do not want more power, and +2 power is a really good jump to have on every single one of your turns. And if
Mhm.
you are still either winning or trading successfully on defensive strikes, you still get gauge for those. It's only the attacks that you make with your action on your turn, not any attack that you hit with, even the ones on your opponent's turn.
Okay, and so that means that you might be able to maintain your offense for a few turns longer than I think you would because you might be able to actually get some gauge to keep this going. Um, and I suppose that would also change your calculations about like um what cards you defend with versus what cards you attack with because the cards you're attacking with are getting sealed.
Yes, so you're never going to get them back. So like I said, if you are still on your first shuffle, you haven't gone through your deck and you're going absolutely wild and you flip, if you attack with any of those cards, if you have to go back and reshuffle and play a longer game, you're going to lose access to possibly really good moves that you could use in the future there.
Okay. So there's a lot of reasons it sounds like to wait a little bit to exceed as Waldstein. Your opponent's options are down as always, so you have a little bit more control over what they are going to play into you. But also, uh, the earlier you flip, the more you're going to be feeling those the loss of those sealed cards.
Yeah, you do not want to be
Okay.
losing some of your best cards because you really wanted to push it too early. You only got one or two hits out of your flip side, and now you say you used a sweep or a grasp. Now you've
Yep.
lost access to those as EX attacks, and your opponent has that information that they never have to worry about that, and they only have to worry about one in your deck for the rest of the match.
Right. Okay. That makes sense. And I mean and hopefully by the time you're done with all of this, the opponent will be dead and won't be able to contest you. But if they manage to weather it, you might be in some resource trouble.
Yes, definitely. Wallstein is super resource hungry all the time, forever.
Okay, makes sense. Yeah, and as we talk about the kit itself, I might jump in to ask questions about the specifics of how they interact with this. But I think that all makes sense from the perspective of just his, his exceedability in a vacuum. Do you want to move on to the kit?
Yeah, let's go.
Let's do it.
So let's just start left to right here. We got
Sure, sure.
Wirbelwind up first. This is one of my favorite special moves of his. It is his fastest special at speed 4. Um, a lot of players don't expect something that fast out of someone like Waldstein, and it being range 2 with 3 guard means it, will still trade with a well, not trade, but it'll live through a cross. You'll only take a couple of damage, and if they're in the corner or something, you're trading with it. Grasp, it'll still, fight back pretty well against. And even if you miss with this, as long as you're not stunned, you still get to advance 2 afterwards. Uh, but like all of his specials, he's got 1 armor, 2 guard, a push effect, and attacks at range 4 or greater do not hit you, which is such a good ability because Waldstein does not like dealing with projectiles all that much. He is very prone to them if you're not lucky, especially for someone like Mr. Ryu or Ken with repeatable fireballs.
Right. So this is kind of his anti-zoner card. Because it also it kind of does the Zangief green hands thing where you dodge the attack, but then you also just get to move forward
Yep.
as an after. So even if you whiff with this, you're getting some value out of it. Um, but it also That's interesting though, because it also from what you just described, it would make me think that Waldstein wants to be close to his opponent, but this card also pushes his opponent away if it hits.
Yes, you
So I
do get
guess
to
I
advance 2 afterwards, but it's not a full catch up.
right, and I guess you could make that greater or, uh, or you could mitigate it by using his front side ability. You could push and then pull or something.
Exactly, which
Uh,
is that little bit of finer degree of control that you were talking about. Do I want him farther
right.
away or closer after I move?
So it's not a situation quite like it is with Zangief, like I just mentioned, where like the end goal of him playing Green Hands, of playing Banishing Flat, is he ends up here every single time, pretty much with no ambiguity about it. Waldstein, it sounds like, might actually want to end at range 4 or at range 2 or something, and he has the ability to control that.
Yes, Waldstein is a much larger range for his attacks than a lot of heavies do. You see characters like, Zangief, where his whole ability and kit is like get to range one, go.
Right. Right.
Potemkin, get to range one, go. Waldstein isn't like that. He's got good range on a lot of his abilities. He's very good at controlling the space around him. He's threatening to keep you out of it or keep you in it if you don't want to be there. He's very much like an anti-heavy heavy. I've played a couple of games against Zangief with Waldstein, and Zangief had no fun whatsoever. I was just swinging wildly every single turn, pushing him one, and he got maybe like one hit on me. It was really miserable uh, for Zangief.
Yeah, you had plenty of fun. It wasn't miserable at all for you.
Actually, I played against that same player at a recent tournament. He took Zangief in his three, and when we got to the finals, he banned my Waldstein because he's like, I don't want to deal with that. You're just going to keep me out of range one for the rest of the game. But then I did the same exact thing with Hazama, so it still ended up the same.
It's pretty much the same, yeah. Okay, so this is anti-zoner card, but in matchups when you're not playing the zoner, it's your zoning card.
Yes, it it
And you just get that positioning control that gives you the ability to keep them where you want them.
it also hits for a massive chunk of damage, and if you can
Oh yeah,
EX it, oh boy, a 7 power, range 2, speed 5, uncrossable, or it's so good. Like,
yeah.
Waldstein, I will say for all of his special moves, EXing them does so much. It hits so many different breakpoints for both his speed and his defensive options. So I do recommend, if you can, possibly saving up some of those specials for an EX if you have them. If you've got like double Eisennagal, using that defensively when your opponent thinks that they can get like a free, like, oh, I'm just gonna sweep him here and it'll be free, or another speed 3 option like Spike. It's his EXs are super threatening on all of his specials because of just the sheer number of stats on them. Uh, it just makes his hit harder. He hits a little bit faster than you'd think. He survives a little bit more than you think. So I do recommend considering that as well. Sorry for getting off topic.
No, no, no. That is absolutely germane to, I mean, use cases. That is not off topic at all. Um, do you get a similar benefit out of just playing this card with his Exceed ability? Like, I
Yes,
mean,
it's
you're hitting
the
8 power and 5 effective defense.
Yeah, it doesn't up the speed like an EX attack would, but it gives you the same amount of effective defense where, plus two guard is kind of the same as plus one guard, plus one armor for most situations. So
Right.
it turns his attacks into some kind of like pseudo EX attack where they're just a little bit slower. They still take that damage because it's guard and not armor. But the fact that you can just repeat it every turn on your turn that you have gauge and attack that hits is really good.
Okay. That makes sense. Cool. Do you want to, as we're talking about these in general, do you want to move from strike to boost, or do you want to go right across to strikes and then talk about boosts afterward?
Let's go strike to boosts. There are quite a few cards of Waldstein's that I don't use as boosts all that much, so that'll actually probably be a little bit quicker and easier.
Okay.
Wirbelwind blowback, I have never used myself. I have found that Wirbelwind itself is just such a good and valuable card. The situations that you would want to use blowback are super slim compared to the situations you'd want to use Wirbelwind for. I
Right.
guess if you had someone who was like super rushed down and they spent all of their resources to get at range one, and you're just can go like, oh, blow you back, hit you with something at range like two or three, and now you're
Push
back
you
to
even
where you
farther
started.
with his.
Yeah,
Oh,
but
but actually, no. That's you can't push him when you do this. You can't use your character ability.
nope, nope.
So
You're just
you wouldn't.
pushing
Okay.
from the
Yeah.
blowback and whatever
Okay.
your attack might push them for.
Right. I see. And the way that you're describing it, you know, you were in a game against somebody, against a character who was trying to maintain range one. And I mean, excuse me, I mean, Zangief doesn't have an infinite number of resources to spend to stay at range one, but he's going to be spending as many of them as he can to stay there. And you were able to keep him out without having to use blowback.
No, I never had to use blowback against him. I barely let him enter range one even once. Usually, once he got to range one, I would, look at how many focuses and how many of his other moves that prevent him from being moved. I could just grasp him 4 spaces away, and he would have nothing to do for the next 4 turns except prepare, move towards me in some way. Uh,
Right.
yeah, blowback, it's super, super situational. It's not useless. I can see situations it'd be good, but 95% of the time, Wirbelwind as a card is just so much better than the boost.
Yeah, I mean, short of blowback, maybe like setting up a checkpoint that's going to win, checkmate that's going to
Yeah.
win you the game or something. You want to stick to the card just because it's better. I feel like this is something that I've said before in these lessons. Like, whenever we're in a situation where we have to actively think up use cases for something, and there's another thing on the same card that doesn't need any explanation at all, it's like, oh, I wonder if a 6 power range dodge that pushes 3 and advances 2 and has 3 effective guard. I wonder if that's good. Can I think of any reasons to use that?
I
Yeah,
could
you
use
can.
blowback.
Yeah. So maybe the one that speaks louder without us having to do any talking is the one that we should be using more.
Yeah, that grain of salt you were talking about earlier with, like, I never use this. It's a definitely one grain of salt, I would say.
Yeah. No, yeah, if all the dedicated Waldstein mains who are watching this video get super mad at us about undervaluing blowback, frankly, come on my show and tell me why we're wrong because now we have a conversation going. That sounds like I'm starved for content. That sounds
I
great.
I beg to be proven wrong at all times. Like, if you can tell me why blowback is amazing, I beg of you, please let me know so I can
Yeah.
be better.
Yeah, let's do it. All right, cool. So how about Eisennagal?
All right.
Eisennagel, however
Uh,
you pronounce any of his special names.
Very badly. I've always
Yep.
said Eisennagal. I have no idea if that's correct. But this
Yep.
is a good ranged option for him. It's 2 to 4, so it's not going to hit at range one. You never really want to use it at range one, except for like a very spicy scenario, which generally doesn't happen. Like if you're trying to call out a cross. Uh,
Sure.
but that's pretty much it. You're going to be using it as some kind of ranged option. It's got 6 power, so it hits like a Mack truck. 3 speed, which is just a little too slow for me to use this willy nilly. You really want to be thinking about when you're dropping your eyes in the gall. It might look like a really tempting round start option, but it gets beaten by so many things. By
Yeah.
dive. And if your special is going to lose to multiple normals, maybe don't use it until you know it's going to hit.
Right. And with 6 power, 1 armor, like the delta you get out of hitting with this is valuable enough that you want to guarantee it if you can. It
Yes.
sounds like.
This is one of those cards where, like, Furs and Wolf's boost reach, the +0 to 1 range. This is one of the things I would use it for, is to give Eisennagal a fifth range. I think that's really good. Um, it's just a tad bit slower than where it would be borderline overpowered for him, but it's still
Right.
such a good ability. And on hit, you push or pull one, so you get to wiggle them a bit. If you're using your own ability with it, then that's a push or pull two. Or if you want to keep them in the same spot, you just push one, pull one. The after, if you've stunned them, you gain advantage. I have never gotten any use out of that somehow. Every time I drop it, they somehow block it. Or the one time I had to use it defensively, it hit, I stunned them. And I'm like, great, I have advantage. It was my turn
Right.
anyway.
Because it would have been your turn. You have double advantage now.
Oh god.
Yeah, you
But
take 2 turns.
yeah, it's a good ranged out option. Um I like to use it pretty much as follow-ups against, very rush down range one opponents. You throw them a few spaces, they spend, maybe a force to get back into you, try and set something up. If you know that they don't have anything that can hit you at, range four or even range three, or if they have a low probability, drop eyes in the goal, push them out even further, gain advantage. It's a very good card, but it's a little more situational than Wirbelwind, where Wirbelwind has
Right.
like 4 different cases where I'm like, awesome, I really want to use this.
Right. This only has like 2, but they're still really good use cases.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
It's really good, but you gotta be a lot more specific as to when you use it, front side or
Yeah.
backside.
And it seems like with the amount of positional control that Waldstein seems to have in his kit, um, whether or not he has actively set them up into a range where they are vulnerable to being hit by Eisen he might have set them up farther, and they need to spend time to get back in. Um, but a lot of the game is spent in ranges 2 to 4. So it shouldn't be this hard. It shouldn't be that hard to at least have a target with it. It's just things like assault and dive that
Yeah, it's such a
uh
feel bad, you get totally hosed.
yeah. Yeah, that are gonna mess with you. Um so and as you said, like, guaranteeing that hit is important. And also, if we are on Exceed side, it looks like this card and this card have almost identical stats that are affected by the guard goes up to 3 in both cases, the power goes up to 8 in both cases. Would you prefer to hit with Wirbelwind on Exceed side just because it's easier to hit with?
Yes, the fact that it's that one faster and that it's also like range 1 to 2 means that you can put your opponent into the corner, put yourself right next to them into the corner, and just absolutely body them. Whereas Eyes in the
Right.
Goal, you actually have to think about your positioning a little bit more. Um, but Wirbelwind's just a little more, I don't want to say brain dead, but just easier to use, easier to get +2 guard, +2 power benefit out of. I think Wirbelwind is just a little bit better for that, but both are still really good.
Makes sense. And then what about Flex?
All right. Flex, I have used maybe like once or twice. I'm not crazy about it. Um, it gives you like that +1 armor, +1 guard, like half of an EX move. Um, but for someone like Waldstein, it's just it's okay. I like Guys in the Goal as a move a little bit too much to just be using it for +1 armor, +1 guard.
Right.
Like I said before, if you're gonna be using this, it better be the thing to make your attack survive what you know they're going to play, and then hit them back. Like,
Right. So and the same things that we said about the +2 guard on his Exceed side, like it's not going to do anything when you put it on grasp unless you desperately need to take one more point of damage.
yeah,
It's not on its own enough to survive most attacks in the game. So it needs to be on something that already has armor and guard on it.
yeah, and that's like the kind of thing that you would use it for where, like, okay, I'm getting really, really low on life. Um, my opponent is 2. I know that the only thing faster than whatever move I can play will do this much damage. I just need it to prevent so much so I can hit them back and win. Like, oh, if they
Right.
hit me with like grasp, I'll lose because I'm at 3. But if I can play flex on my sweep or something and live, all right, then we're in cooking.
Right.
But it's such a specific in this scenario that you really wanna make sure you're using it to hit and not just using it.
Right. Sure. Um, so what about in situations where oh, actually, I forgot again though, because
You
you
can't
can't use
use
now
this
strike while
UA.
you yeah. Yep, okay. And that includes this one. I was about
Yep,
to ask, well, so what about situations where you could combine the +2 guard with the +1 armor, +1 guard? Oh, wait,
you
you can't do
cannot.
that. I guess you could do it combined with an EX attack.
Yes.
Um, but then you're sacrificing not only uh, the EX attack, but also the ability to use it defensively, which is where a lot of EX attacks kind of shine as that
Yeah.
surprise factor. Okay, so not a ton of use there.
No, that should be
I
used in, like, a checkmate scenario, and if you're
Yep,
using it with an EX, like you said, that's 3 cards out of your hand for someone like
yeah,
Wallstein who is, like I said, super resource hungry. It's
yeah,
that's an investment, so you better be demolishing them in that strike.
sure, sure. Um, and so it sounds like then, this card and this card are strikes before boosts.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
and as you were talking about, EX attacks being an important consideration for Waldstein because of how much he gets out of them. Well, conveniently, I have 2 cards here that I'm unlikely to be boosting, which means that I can use them both as EX attacks.
Mhm. You're not gonna be spending
Yep.
them early just because, like, "Oh, I need something to do. I'll
I'll
th"
just boost because yeah,
Yeah, Waldstein's boost on them being not very good makes their EXs feel better.
Yeah, sure. In the same way that like the joke about season 6 having a very playable copy of Sweep in their deck because of light isn't on it anymore, but armored blow or just defense is. Kind of like that. Like, yeah, it's a downside that you don't have a great boost on these cards, but you really want to be hitting with them, and now you don't have to worry about.
Making that
Uh,
decision, do I want to
yeah,
have +1 to my stats or sweep?
yeah. Sometimes it's nice to have bad options in your kit, or maybe not bad options, but
Easier
uh,
options.
l- yeah, limited options that you can ignore sometimes. What about? I love every name on Waldstein's kit. What about Sturmangriff?
Sturmangriff is your super slow approach option. It see here. It closes 4, so it's a really good gap closer from across the screen, especially if you know that your opponent can't throw out a like some kind of quick fireball with more than 3 damage that can break you like Ryu. Uh
Yep, exactly like Ryu.
yeah, it's a very weird card. So it's 1 range, but it closes you 4, so it effectively has 5 range, 5
Yep.
power. So it's not going to be breaking any like major breakpoints like sweep. So if you throw this into sweep, technically you're going to be losing that trade because you'll be down a card. If you use it with, say, Waldstein's Exceed side, though, all of a sudden 7 power is super scary. Uh,
Yeah.
so that's an important breakpoint to know. Speed 2 is it's weird. I'd almost prefer it to be either faster at speed 3 or slower at speed 1 because
You could like underspeed a sweep or something and come
it's
in
you win
out of
because you
range.
initiated with it. It's
Right.
oh my god. If it was
Yeah.
speed 1, I'd be so happy. I could swing it into slows all day, but speed 2 makes you kind of have to be wary if you're going to be walking into a sweep or a focus or something like that.
Right. Um and so I noticed like with Wirbelwind, you've got natively without any investment from Waldstein's Exceed side, you have 3 effective defenses, which for a speed 4 card is like pretty good.
Yeah.
Like there is kind of an inverse relationship between um speed and guard or effective guard, and we tend to see like speaking of Ryu, like a speed 4 option having 4 guard is not unheard of.
No, he's
The
got
s-
very middling stats on that one.
yeah, uh the same 3 guard on speed 3 is actually starting to look a little bit frail. And then the same armor and guard on speed 2 is like kind of half of what you might be expecting from a speed 2 card. Like it seems like this starts losing to more and more things the slower
Yep,
it
because
gets.
the slower you go, the harder you usually hit.
Yeah, and it sounds like it's tough to it becomes tougher and tougher. Like even if you do invest uh with his exceed ability, you're reaching 5 guard, which is, lower than the kind of 6 that we would expect to see from
Mhm.
a 2 speed card. Does that impact the playability of this card where like, with other, close 4 options with some defense on them, like putting defend on assault for a season 1 through 5 character and playing assault at range 1 is totally legitimate because close attacks are consistent when they have some guard on them.
Yeah.
Do I sort of need to play this card at max range against opponents without fireballs? Because it seems like it's kind of tough to finagle a situation where they're not. If I'm here, almost everything that they're going to do is both faster than speed 2 and hits harder than 3
Yep.
guard.
It's
Okay.
definitely needs to be played most of the time at its max range to get, like, the most effectiveness where you're gonna be either dodging their hits at that max range, or you're gonna hit them, but you're at least gonna trade and, hopefully be moving into your preferred range,
In
up
your
into their
preferred
face,
range,
yeah.
right?
Um,
Okay.
I will say, you did talk about Wirbelwind, being speed 4. Um, you do still get benefit actually out of something like Wirbelwind or even yeah, I think it might be just Wirbelwind because his after effect still does advance too. So if you're at range 1 or 2 and you slap down Wirbelwind and your opponent crosses you, they're not going to break you. You're not going to hit them. You'll take 2, but you still get to at least advance 2 and stay into their range. So it's
Right.
not like the most useless thing. Um, these things catching cross like they do, because all of his specials, bear through cross, or grasp. Uh,
Right.
Not all of them win against both of them, but they at least
They
survive
at
and
least
you
don't
can
get
go.
they at least don't get stunned, right?
Yeah. There's been a couple times where I've called out across where someone was trying to cross out at range one with an Eisenagol and a Sturmangriff. You hit me, I'm like, okay, I'll take 2 damage, take even more, and they're like, oh no. But
Right.
that's you don't have reading in this set, so you can't force it. You just gotta hope. Uh,
Right.
Very new scenario. But yeah, as you get lower and lower in speed, you start having to really be using the max range. I'll talk about Frozen Wolf in a second and why I'm not crazy about that card. But Sturmangriff at range 5, right when like most characters' attacks aren't going to hit you, say they've already spent one of their projectiles, it's a pretty good option to get into someone's face. It hits really hard. The effect is really good. You can push them farther if you're only about half screen, or if you really want to throw them like behind you, you can chuck them behind you. If you're playing against the one online Vega, I guess, who wants to be in the corner.
Right. So when I said earlier that like Wirbelwind is your anti-zoner card and also six other things,
Yeah.
Sturmangriff is your anti-zoner card.
Yes, that is
It's uh,
really good
it,
for that.
it's what you play when you need to come in right now.
Yep, you're gonna play it.
Uh,
You're gonna hope that your opponent doesn't have something to stun you out of your clothes, or they're just gonna throw out a defensive option and you hit them with it. The bad thing about it, though, at max range, it's super telegraphed. Like, if
sure.
you're at range
D-
5 and you're
yeah.
playing a card.
Does he have anything else that hit? No, he doesn't. Yeah. It's only that. It's only that unless it's like backed up by reach or something. So
Has something.
if so
Yeah,
if he puts anything down here, it's guaranteed to be Sturmangriff pretty much.
not guaranteed. Your opponent might think that, which can now lead to more mind games of like, "Oh, okay, I'm at range 5," and you can play either Sturmangriff, or you might just wanna play Block and get some free
Mm.
gauge and make them like, "Oh, I gotta hit it with my ranged attack." Okay, you've baited out their ranged attack, you've gotten yourself a gauge, and then now you can play Sturmangriff.
Now you play Sturmangriff next turn, right? Or they anticipated it and they were going to play a sweep
Yep.
to try to catch it, and now they wasted that. Okay, that makes sense.
Waldstein requires lots and lots of thought about when he's going to use his cards. They're all pretty specific as to when they're good. Your opponent will know that. They will see it coming. Like at range 5, nothing's going to hit you except Sturmangriff. But the first time that you successfully psych them out and be like, "Oh, I played Block," it
Right,
will mess with them the rest of the match. It's so funny to
right,
watch them
and
try to turn the wheel.
now they know that they have to think about that coming from you, and it's going to affect the rest of their play patterns, and you can take advantage of that.
Yep, because all of a sudden now, like, oh, I'll just hit it with my sweep. That's safe, or I'll Hadouken it or something. Now it's a resource that they'll actually have to spend. Or you can drop a Wirbelwind in if they're trying to hit you for a ranged option. If it's faster than 4, which a decent amount of them are, you'll dodge it and
Yep,
get closer. So it's
yep,
just always a good thing to consider. Fake telegraph and psyching out your opponent. I tend to like the mind games a lot. They work well for me when
mhm,
my character does not have a lot of uh, disguised options. Usually, when he's playing something, it's might be a little obvious, but I Boasting does need a smart plays on all of his moves, special and otherwise.
right. Got it. Okay, that makes sense. And what about Face Me?
Face Me is amazing. I love this boost. Um, it is very good when you are at a particular range. Say I don't know. Let's range 3. Say we're at range 3, and I have two very good range 3 options. I got like say Spike and Assault. I don't know. Dropping that Sturmangriff, you get to draw 2, and then you draw a third for your turn as you did not strike that turn. So it puts
Right,
you up, 2 cards from what you had before, draw 3, and your opponent pretty much has to hit you because +2 speed and +2 armor is really good for Waldstein. Even if you're just using them separately, like, okay, am I going to use a fast move that's going to benefit from the +2 speed, or a slow move that benefits from the +2 armor? Generally, you're
Right.
not going to maybe get use out of both, but just the threat of having either or, usually enough to make your opponent like, okay, I just have to attack him now. So it's really good for pressuring low resource opponents and setting up like just good moves you have in your hand, because refilling your hand is great, but you can't do it willy nilly. Because if your opponent says like, okay, yeah, all right, I don't care, attack me with +2 speed and +2 armor, and all of your options are like bad, or you're at range 4 and only like two things hit, it
Right.
can be bad for you. So definitely do make sure you have something that can hit next turn and that will benefit from +2 speed or +2 armor. Or
Right.
go YOLO mode and hope that you draw something instead.
You drew 3 new cards, that's 3 chances that you have something to play.
Technically 4, you can still wild swing.
Oh, that's very true. So, and it seems like, when you play this, you should not only expect to have something to anticipate having something to play on your next turn, you should really just be ready for when your opponent punches you.
Yeah, this card is pretty much like striking is going to happen. I have an attack that will hit at this range. Do you want me to hit you faster, or do you want to try and hit me now? I've already drawn
Right.
two cards.
Right. And, again, honestly, EX attacks, if you can make somebody, strike into you while you're holding an EX assault or something like that.
Yep. And there's like, okay, I just have to beat this option. Nope. Now you got EX'd on the defense, and your momentum has been ruined.
Right. And when you were talking about, how resource hungry Waldstein is, honestly, it seems like the draw 2, if there was nothing else on this boost, it might still be okay.
Yeah, it's a
Like,
solid card.
y yeah, getting a lot out of, getting a lot of draw on a character that needs it is pretty vital. And also, it seems like from what you were saying, Sturmangriff is a card that you're either gonna use or you're not gonna use. Like, if you're in a situation where you can use it, you kinda have to use it to get in. But there's a lot of times when you're gonna be stuck in this range, and you have other options. So maybe you don't need Sturmangriff, so you can play face me more often.
Yeah, it's see here. I'm just thinking real quick. Yeah, because when you, like you say, if you're at the ranges 2, 3, or even 1, and you're not trying to do something crazy and wild and call out like a grasp or a cross or some other fast option that moves you like that, it's just going to be better as drawing 3 cards and threatening an insanely good attack next turn. And
Right.
sometimes that threat alone is enough to make an opponent kind of panic and make a wrong decision, or they might just say, you know what, I don't think you have anything. And then all of a sudden you're hitting them for a speed 6, power 6 Wirbelwind. Um,
Right.
Unfortunately, like the rest of his special boosts, it makes him strike, and you do not get the option to use your character ability.
Right.
So you're not going to be able to add power or do anything else besides that +2 speed and +2 armor, which is completely the inverse of his +2 power, +2 guard. So you're never going to
Right,
have
yeah.
that.
You can't ever have all 4 stats.
Nope, can't have your cake and eat it too.
Right, okay. Alright, that makes sense, though. So it sounds like play Sturmangriff when your opponent forces you to, otherwise play face me.
Yes, that is pretty correct. Sermon Grift is great for what it does. Sometimes you just don't need to do it, but Waldstein
Yep.
always needs cards, so
Okay.
draw a lot.
Sounds good, sounds good. Cool. And how about, Furzenwolf? Unless you have more stuff to say about, Sturmangriff, or honestly, any of the other cards we've talked about so far.
No, I think that I've pretty much covered everything there. Furzum Wolf is going to be a short one. I'm not crazy about this card. I'm not crazy about its boost. It's a speed one. It's so slow. It gets hit by everything, and it has such little stats. The only thing that it like cleanly beats is grasp, and that's it. And since this is season 6 and we don't have access to readings, you aren't going to be able to force them to grasp. It is like the
I thi
hardest call out card he has.
I think we actually I think I isn't reading on, Dive in season 6? I remember it
This
being, yeah, we have reading, but not parry, I think.
not parry. Oh, well then now you can just ignore everything that I've said, and I've started
Yeah.
regretting being on the show. Thank you very
Oh,
much.
don't worry about it.
Oh my god, I forgot there was reading on dive. This is what I get for not having normals in front of me. All
So,
right.
but we've so some of the call out options that you've described are a little bit less of a hard read when they're backed up by a guaranteed reading play or something. But
Yep.
you're still, I mean, you're still right that if a card is difficult to manufacture a hit with, like hitting with cleanly beating grasp or something, if you need reading to do it, it's probably not that easy to
Yeah.
confirm of a card. Yeah,
It's good if you know that they have grasp in their hand for some reason or another. They revealed it somehow. I don't know, but if you know it's in their hand and you can reading it out, that's very good. Uses one of their probably best normals, and you slap them back for 6 power. But at 1 speed and otherwise 4 power, like the 3 range isn't impressive with that stat line. It's just
yeah,
it's so underwhelming and it's kind of upsetting. Uh, the only thing else that it really kind of trades with is like focus because it's also speed 1. So you'll both hit for 6, but even then they get to draw a card. You can't push them out of your range at all. It Yeah, I use this card for force more often than I attack with it. And I boost with it more often than I attack with it too, which is definitely saying something.
yeah. It seems like what I'm gathering is that Waldstein's stat lines, even with his exceed ability, are best when they're combined with like sort of mid speed cards that really could benefit from going from 3 guard to 5 guard or something.
Yeah.
When you're talking about ones and twos, 1 and 2 speed, the stuff that you are up against tends to just hit too hard to be able to armor through it, even with some help. Like Wolf with like EX Wolf on exceed mode would get up to 7 guard, which is equal to focus, uh which is the one speed card we would most easily compare this to. That's a
Yeah.
huge amount of resources to make something that is like focus.
As good as a normal.
Yeah. And I'm sure that there are use cases for it. Like I mean, on front side, it seems like uh push or pull 1 or 2, push 2, push 2. If you desperately want to, for some reason, shove them all the way across the arena, I guess you
But
can
even
with
then,
this.
with only like 3 defensive stats, you're likely getting
Yeah,
stunned out by anything they play
by
except for
anything,
grasp.
almost anything they play. Yeah, that's true. Okay. No, you've convinced me. That makes sense. And then reach. You mentioned this is one of the boosts that you would be willing to forego your character ability for.
Yes, it is such a good option to make like a checkmate where like, okay, I need to hit with this particular move at one range farther than it normally does so I can dodge their safe options for it. Like making Catastrophe a range 3 ability, nuts. Eyes in the Gall,
Right.
range 5 is really good. Even having Sturmangriff essentially like close an extra 1, and now you can really close the gap from across the screen if you put yourself in an unfortunate situation is really good. I use this card for force, then I would use the boost, and then I would attack with it. And like I said, only if you're like pretty solid sure they're gonna try and grasp you, or if you can make them grasp you.
Right. And it sounds like you would use it as force first, not necessarily because reach is bad, but just because Wildstein really needs force bad.
Yes, his if you need to like move that extra 1, if you need to just like draw an extra card somewhere, Wolf will be like the first card that I pitch. Most of the time, I'm going to be using it for movement, unless I have like the EX of it. If you have EX Wolf, it becomes kind of better. It can beat sweep at range 1 if you're attacking with it, and it can survive a lot more. But otherwise, I wouldn't even use it all that much unless you have them pushed into the corner like here. Um,
Right.
it's just such a like you said, unless you're EXing and uh, what's the button for flip again?
F.
Oh, thank God. All right. Even with his flip side ability and EXing Wolf, that's 2 cards out of your hand, 1 card out of your gauge, and you lose one of those Wolves forever. It's sealed. So that's a lot
Right.
of setup for like a magical Christmas land scenario.
Right, sure. And again, as we were talking about with blowback, if we need to come up with this much justification to use something, it's probably maybe not worth using.
Yeah, it's not it. Sorry,
Yep.
Waldstein.
That makes sense. Actually gives me a good opportunity to ask though. The way that the cleanup effect on character on your Exceed character ability interacts with EX attacks, I assume is that one does go to your discard pile like normal,
Yes,
and
one gets discarded to your pile.
the the one that is really your attack gets sealed.
Yep, you got it. So
Cool.
you'll still
Okay,
have that one copy for the future somewhere, but one of them's gone forever.
I gotcha. Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. Uh, let's move on to ultras. These ones I'm excited about. I also just noticed that this one is crooked. Uh, tell me about. Oh wow. Okay, so catastrophe does not need much explanation. It doesn't look like. Tell me about catastrophe.
So Catastrophe is one of your two gauge ultras. It's probably your fastest option in your special suite, especially if you're not yeah, definitely the fastest. So power 7, speed 5, range 1 to 2. It's good, but it has no defensive stats whatsoever, and even for speed 5 that can be dangerous. You can get crossed, you can get grasped. It's really good for making a lot of distance, especially if you know that your opponent spent a lot of those faster options like Grasp or Cross, or if they've spent some focuses and you're like, okay, this seems like a pretty safe option to just push them away from me. Uh,
Right.
and even if you are the front side of Waldstein and you just, action strike, you can hit them for 7 if they like drop a sweep or something, roll them 1, and then
Yep.
proceed
And then
to
just shove them across
woo!
the
Yep.
whole board. And you don't have anything that hits there, but odds are they don't either.
Nope.
Like
And
Ryu might be able to make something happen before you can make something happen by moving forward a little bit, but they're gonna have to spend some resources to come back in.
yes, usually I would use a maneuver like that on a slower, less mobile, closer range character, say another grappler perhaps, because launching
Yep.
them across the screen is devastating. Um, Maybe against Ryu I wouldn't do it because he has good ranged options and good movement, but
Right.
it's just very good for setting that up. But the fact that it is speed 5, no defense is it's a little bit of a gamble. You can get crossed grasp. There's a lot of fast specials out there. One
Sure.
little poke can put you over. That's why I like to use things like reach at range 3. If I'm just trying to get like a clean 7 damage, break a sweep or something. It does hit a lot of breakpoints even without his flip side, like 7 damage.
Yep.
Sweep you're
Beat
gonna win
sweep at
with
least. Yep.
focus, but you're not gonna beat focus generally if you're not striking with a spike or something. But
Right.
it's just a very solid card for a pretty low gauge cost. Um, I really like this card, and I really like the boost on it too, which I use liberally. Um, heck, heck, Hekatonker, I think.
Hecatonchier?
Care?
We
I don't
they
speak
they didn't
German.
they didn't uh they didn't put me on this show because of my ability to pronounce card names.
We at our last local tournament, the tournament organizer, Jake, he likes to do like little quizzes and stuff in the middle, and it's like a really
Mhm.
fun break. But then they're saying like, "Oh, name a card with this," and I'm like, "Okay, which one of Waldstein's cards is this?" Because I don't know German. I just know the
Right.
pictures and descriptions.
I wonder if that's why season 6 doesn't have Perry in it. Because Perry asks you to name a card. And if you have to name one of Waldstein's cards and you pronounce it incorrectly, or one of like Yuzuriha's cards and you pronounce it incorrectly, does the Perry go off?
Yes, Exceed is not as cutthroat as like Magic: The Gathering, where you would be
Right.
eviscerated for doing something like that.
Right. That's yeah, of course. All right. So you like the boost on this card, however it's pronounced, whatever it is, Hecaton Shier. I think that's actually the name of. This is great radio, I'm sure. I'm pretty sure that's the name of Imogene's. Yeah, it is. Hey, there you go. Here you go.
Oh, oh, that's her flip
So
side.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So I guess when you play this boost, assume that you turn into some kind of weird blood lion. All right. Sorry. Continue. That
No,
was
it's okay.
a great segue, I'm sure.
So yeah, his boost is for each card in your hand, draw one. Obviously, the more cards in your hand that you have, the more that you're gonna draw. The fine line is being at 3 cards in hand after you play this. So if you have 4 cards in your hand and one of them's Catastrophe, and you drop like I boost Hecaton Chair, I have 3 cards in hand. I'll draw 3, and then I'll draw one more. Essentially, you're drawing one extra card than you would if you were just using this for force. If you have like lower cards in hand, like 2 or 3 or 1 or 2, it's it's just not worth it. It's better to be used for force or an attack.
Right.
If you have 4 cards in hand after you play this, so you have 5, play Catastrophes, Boost, Hecatoncheir, I draw 4 cards. You're gonna draw 4, go up to 8, you're gonna draw another one at the end of the turn and have to discard 2. Doesn't
Right.
feel great, but if there are times where you are searching for, like, that one attack, if I get this one attack in, like, the next turn, I'll win, and you got
Right. Yeah.
4,
You
5,
you're
6
not
cards in hand.
you're not looking for like overall material. You're looking for an answer.
Yes, being at 3 cards when you, after you play it is for value. Being at any more should be, "I need a very specific thing right now," and
Right.
it's very good for that.
Have you ever played it when you're at like a full hand size, like a 7 hand, just draw through your whole deck, or has
No,
that
no,
never
it
happened?
I can't do it, no, that even if I was looking unless I was looking for, like, the last card in the game and that would not, like, draw me out, I
Right.
would never do that. Seeing just
Yeah.
7 cards go into my hand and then disappear, I'm like, "I'm losing
Yeah.
so many options."
That feels too bad. I think I would have to agree. So, and the fact that again, Waldstein is pretty resource hungry. This gives you a very strong hand reload option. So that kind of answers my question about whether you would ever want to play Catastrophe as an EX attack. It sounds like maybe not because you want to use at least one copy as this boost.
It's a very good boost, but I would actually use that as an EX attack if you have it. If as long as you know that you're in a situation where the EX is gonna make it hit, like you're at range 2. Let me see here. So say I have pretend Ryu is Zangief. Oh, I was drawn. Yeah, pretend Ryu is Zangief. He is closing in on me. He's scary. I don't know what to do. He doesn't have a I can't be stunned effect going on. EXing Catastrophe beats out a cross, doesn't get you stunned out. If they have any kind of like speed boost, it beats their speed assault. Being at speed 6 on the attack for an EX does so well. It also breaks focus, I believe. Focus should only have 7 defensive
Yep.
stats, but I'm
Yep. Yep. Hits 8.
so
Yep. So you can push him, or rather, you can stun it at the very least, no matter what.
yeah, you don't need to push them when they don't get to do anything after you hit them.
Right. Very true.
Yeah, so I if Catastrophe is like one of his trademark, well, which do you need right now? Do you want to
Right.
have Catastrophe as a move? Do you think you're going to be spending some cards and need to draw back up? Do you have nothing else that can do either of those options? Catastrophe fills both slots. Obviously, as a boost, it doesn't cost you anything. There's no gauge or force cost, whereas using it as an attack will still be 2 gauge. So missing it is really not great. Missing any of his ultras is really bad.
Right. Sure. And actually, follow up question that is probably relevant when we talk about any of these ultras. I assume the fact that you have not once mentioned how Waldstein's Exceed ability interacts with these ultras is because it is not practical to play an ultra while he's exceeded and use his ability.
You
Because
really
that is
don't need to.
yeah, that's a lot of resources that you're spending uh to make that happen.
Yeah, usually you just kind of have to pick one. Am I an Ultra Waldstein or am I a Exceed side Waldstein? And like there'll be
Right.
situations where both are going to be very good, and you're just going to have to pick whichever one you think is going to bring you to victory. If you think landing a couple of really good Ultras will just cripple your opponent, like comboing Werfen Erschlagen, making your opponent discard 4 cards at random, and then catastrophing them across the screen is a solid move against so many characters. Sometimes you might just need to hit them for +2 power and +2 guard for the next 3 turns. It's
Sure.
totally situation dependent.
Yeah, you have to make that call. But the answer is very rarely both. Because
Yes.
in order to play Catastrophe on Exceed side, you would have to be at such a resource advantage over your opponent that you're probably just already winning the game anyway.
Yeah, you're
And
overspending at that point.
and Waldstein doesn't have enough resources to make that happen. Okay, that's good to
Yeah.
know.
I
So
would do
and
it
that
maybe if you were flipped and it's gonna be, like, the last strike of the game. Like, "Okay, I got
mm,
Catastrophe. I know you have, like, 2 cards in hand. I just need to hit you for 9 so you die." That's
right.
would be the only one I'd do consistently.
Right, yeah, you're not gonna do it for surely not on, like, Verdurban or something, you just won't have the gauge for that, but
No, you will not.
but yeah, but it's basically like you do that when you're positive that there isn't going to be another turn.
Yes.
Okay.
If you're gonna EX flip side, +2 power, +2 guard, and use an ultra, it
Right.
should be the last strike, or you're setting up for that last strike.
That makes sense. Okay. Cool. So good hand reload, good attack if you can get it. Decide whether or not you're going to use this before you exceed. That's true of all of the ultras, it sounds like.
Yeah,
Cool.
it's probably his most consistent one because of the higher speed, and the pretty, easy range, 1 to 2. It's the one that I usually use as an attack the most, but it's just such a good boost. There's never a wrong time to use that boost if you have 4 cards in hand and nothing better to do. It's
Right.
just very good.
Right. Okay. Makes sense. How
Alright.
about I just heard you pronounce the name of this card and it cracked me up, so will you say this again for me?
Ah, yes, Werfen Erschlagen.
Yes. All right, perfect.
I
Tell
doubt
me
that's
about
correct.
tell me about this card. I'm
Alright,
not going to say the name.
so this is probably one of his most text-laden cards. It does a lot. It's very specific. It's range 2 to 3. It's not hitting at range 1, so you can't really bluff that at range 1. It has no defensive stats, so really have to be careful about being tricky with it. 4 power, 4 speed, ignores armor, does not ignore guard, so you will not break focuses and sweeps. It's pretty much just for blocks and special moves that have some amount of armor and only armor, or
Right.
armor and less guard. Um, but the other thing it has on hit is you discard 4 cards at random. I
Yeah.
mentioned before, I am also a Hazama player, and Hazama loves to make people discard cards. So I love to try and sneak this in when I can. It's probably the most practical meme card he has. We'll talk about Vertibin in a second. Um, but discarding 4 cards from your opponent's hand at random is such a devastating play if you can call out a slow move. Even if you're hitting sweep and you're still taking 6 and discarding, as long as you can make them discard the full 4 cards, you win that trade. You have set them down
Right.
4 resources, which is something Waldstein really likes to do so he can spend some time of his own building his resources back.
Right. And you mentioned there being some situations among the specials that you would specifically do when they were low on resources because they wouldn't have an answer to them. This is a way to set those things up.
Exactly, yes. If you can rob all the cards out of your opponent's hand and make them prepare on their turn, they have like what, 2 cards in hand. Say you have like 4 different attacks. Like, okay, the chances of them hitting the 1 card that would beat this is so much lower than
Right.
it would be normally. Or you made them discard 4 cards and they discarded one of them, so you're like, okay, my option's now 50% safer. Let's go
Right.
to town.
Right. That makes sense. Okay. And it is an unsafe card. You can't, as we mentioned, you can't really use it with the bonus guard, and even if you could, it wouldn't be enough.
Nope, 2 guard does
Um,
almost nothing.
yeah, it doesn't really seem like he has much in his kit to make it safer, short of like really, really messing with somebody by using face me or something. But like just in terms of stats, he's not going to get there. It's always going to be a call out play.
Yeah, or you're gonna put reach on it and get some extra range. That range 4 is really good, pretty
Oh,
threatening. But
sure. Yeah,
um,
you're at least on curve then.
yes, and
Okay.
it's so specific. Like I said, you really got to be careful, and missing it can happen. You can either miss, you can get stunned out, they can move out of the way, and it's just really feel bad when you miss. But it's such a good payoff when you hit and you can make them discard full 4 cards.
Right. That makes sense. And what about the destroyers?
That is one of my favorite boosts of his because it's so weird. So your normal attacks have +2 minimum and maximum range and +2 power. So now all of a sudden your opponent's perceptions of what cards can hit them fly out the window because it is
Right.
only his normal attacks. So if you are at say,
Yeah, let me keep talking. I'm just going to pull them out really quick.
um, let's just assume we are at range 3, or you know what? No, let's go starting. Starting. If I
Sure.
have Werfen Erschlagen in my hand, and I'm like, okay, do I have any normals that will now hit at range 4? So turn 1, I boost Werfen Erschlagen. My opponent now has to think and sweat about what they're going to do because I can respond to just about anything with a speed 6 power 5 cross.
Right.
And that usually alone is threatening enough for them to like either tech it maybe or
Or run in at you, do something to dramatically change the situation.
run into the range of my specials.
Right.
It
Right.
throws off their math so much, and it's really, really good. Um,
Right.
it does limit your own options too. So now grasp only hits at range 3. It doesn't have any kind of
Right.
wiggle room. Um, assault will
So
hit at like a specific range. It's
so so because people frequently ask about this, just to make it explicit, the +2/+2 range, uh, it adds the first number to the minimum range on a card, it adds the second number to the maximum range on a card.
exactly.
Um, so for example, on reach over here, +0/+1 doesn't do anything to the minimum range, it makes the maximum range 1 longer, which means that if you put reach on grasp, for example, you're hitting at ranges 1 and 2.
Yep.
If you put the destroyers on grasp, you're hitting at ranges 3 to 5, right?
3 to 3. It is only a +2 minimum, +2 maximum. So your minimum range goes up to 3 and your maximum range goes up to 3. For any card that hits at one specific range, you just add 2 to it and
Oh,
that's it.
that's right. Of course, yeah, alright, and then, uh, so your cross is going from now it's hitting at 3 to 4. Uh, your spike is a projectile now. That's
Yep.
kinda how this card works, is you're but at range, you're turning on every option you have pretty much.
Yes, it is your other anti-zoning tool where if your opponent's trying to maintain like some very annoying range 5 stuff and you're like, "All right, cool. I'm about here. What can I do? Let me sweep." If you
Right.
have work
Anything you want pretty much.
Yeah, it works best with the cards with big ranges like sweep, obviously being the biggest, but cross and spike it's still pretty good for focus as well. But it really is a way to both punish and threaten preemptively anyone who wants to be away from you. Like, okay, you've
Sure.
made a lot of good moves. Now you have to get 3 in, or my sweep will still hit you because sweep will hit you for here, here, and here. And sometimes
Right.
having to move in 3 spaces is just something they can't do or would take all the cards in their hand. Um,
Right.
conversely, you can lock yourself out of specific options. So if you play this and they're like, cool, I will fly into range 1 for some reason or another. Now you have only your specials, and they know that they're safe from grasp, they're safe from focus, they're safe from everything except dive.
Right.
Um, as far as your normals go. So it
Oh,
is
yeah,
something
dive
that
would
you're
because dive would wind you up here and it would still
Yeah,
hit. That's
the
kinda
range
fun.
1
Okay.
dive.
Gotcha. Turn into a really huge cami for 1 turn, I guess.
It's
Um,
such a meme.
so so and then the after, if your attack did not hit, return this to your hand. So if you do manage to whiff, um, on the strike, this goes back to your hand. You can set it up again later. You can, use the ultra if you want to at least keep that option alive.
Yes, you got it.
Um, if you hit with like, if you I guess you could also, well, I was gonna say in situations where you would be playing this card, you're probably not gonna be bluffing and then playing a special instead.
No,
Uh,
because it's just not
most of them
that
don't
great, yeah.
most of them don't hit. Yeah, okay. Um, okay,
And
that
even
makes sense.
if you do play one of your specials and it does hit, you still lose that boost and you don't get any kind of benefit because it's when your attack hits, not specifically a normal attack.
A normal hit, exactly,
Yeah.
yeah.
Merkava's the one
Um,
that says if you have like a boost, Jormungandr, your normal attacks have plus like 2 range or something. If you did not play a normal, return it back to your hand.
right,
Um,
right,
this one, as long as your attack hits, it's gone. One
right.
use.
I also managed to have this entire conversation with you about this boost without noticing that it also has +2 power on it, and,
Yes.
like, there's a lot of things that do very well with +2 power among the normals, like +2 power sweep beats focus.
Yep.
You get an EX attack, all of a sudden you're beating sweep with your assaults, like, the +2 power is a important consideration too.
It's a very important breakpoint. It's the same thing with Waldstein's flip side. Um,
Yep.
and those you can actually reasonably set up. if you are at range 3 and you're already flipped into your exceed side and you have this down on the field, if your
Yeah.
opponent passes the turn back to you, you're about to hit them with a speed 7, range 3, power 7 grasp and throw
Yeah.
them wherever you want. It's
That's an ultra.
terrifying.
That's actually that's better than your 2 gauge ultra in
Mhm.
terms of stat line. Alright, that's crazy.
Yeah, you just have to be able to adapt when your opponent inevitably reacts to it. They're gonna be like, "Oh no, I either have to attack with something that'll keep me safe, or I have
Right.
to move into his face." Which, if you play that card against someone who does not want to be in your face, very scary for them. Or they can
Right, yeah.
parry it.
You're winning the exchange anyway if you've made them deposition themselves like that. That makes sense.
Yes, Waldstein not only pushes and pulls you, he makes you very afraid to stay where you're at.
Right. So, yeah, he makes you, uh, make decisions that you're not comfortable with to deny him that value. Okay. And you mentioned it as being the other meme card.
Yes.
Please tell me about Verdurbin.
Verdurbin is his last Ultra. It is 4 gauge, so extremely expensive. It hits at ranges 3 to 4, which is an odd range. It's not a very big range for him, especially for something as expensive as 4. It's power 10, speed
Yep,
1. You're going last unless you're playing against focus.
yep.
And armor 4. You are stun immune, so no matter what, as long as you're not dead, this will still hit. Um, but it's so expensive and it's so specific, and you need to set this face up. You
Yeah.
cannot attack with it face down. You cannot wild swing into it. I did ask my resident
Oh.
rules lawyer friend, like, can I wild swing with this so I don't make a fool of myself today? Already did, but avoided it a second time. He said, no, you have to play this face up from your hand
From your
on attack
hand.
or defense.
Okay. So on defense, at the very least, you're denying your opponent the ability to respond to this.
Yes,
But
they're
even then, they need to be standing at range 3 to 4 and have basically nothing faster than speed 1 that moves them out of that range, and everybody has stuff faster than that.
yes, it's good for tanking a hit and slapping them back, but for 4 gauge 10 power, it's so iffy sometimes. Um, the best scenario I could think of would be like what's it called? Ryu using a Hadouken me at range 4, um, and me just clapping them back for 10. It still
Right,
cost me 4 gauge. It's still a third of their life though. I've only
right.
ever used, not even just successfully, only played Verdurbin once in my entire career of playing Waldstein. Um, and I played a raw Verdurbin against a boosted to hell Spike. We both hit each other for 10 damage, and it was extremely hilarious.
And
Uh,
you shook hands and went home afterward.
it didn't kill either of us, which was the funny part. Uh,
Yeah.
it brought us both to single digits, but it did not kill each other. He's like, "Wow, I thought my speed 7, power 10 Spike would have totally hosed everything," and I'm like, "Everything except one."
Except the because you had the heart of the cards on your side. Okay, so unfortunately, cool as it might be, probably not the optimal play to go for Verdurbin.
No,
Um, that thing that I said at the start of the lesson about we're playing to win, and if you wanna uh, play for fun, please play Verdurbin if you're trying to play for fun because it's such a fun card.
it will make your opponent's jaw drop when you play it defensively and like, "Oh, I forgot that
Oh,
was the
yeah.
thing."
I've seen it happen. I've seen it happen, somebody's first game people were watching, played an EX Verdurbin on
Oh my
defense.
god.
Yeah, it was a good time.
Ooh.
Um, you love to see it. Alright, so unfortunately, not super practical in, like, a tournament game.
No.
What about maximize power?
Maximize power is absolutely fantastic. It's a really good boost of his. It does cost 1 force, but that is what I'm happy to pay. It's plus 4 armor, and you advance up to 2 now. Not just close
Yep,
advance, so if you're in the corner, you can cross over them, get to range 2, and you have 4 armor for this turn.
yep.
At the start of your turn, you add it to your gauge. So you're pretty much saying, I'm playing this. This is going to my gauge next turn. Hit me if you want. I also moved either I also moved towards you or crossed over you into a
Right.
position that isn't great. Take your pick of what you want to do.
Right.
Um, it's good either way, whether you get to, tank a hit for 4 armor or if you get it to your gauge. Both are good. You still get to advance 2, so you're spending essentially 2 cars to still move up to 2. So it's equal on that force. Plus, you get plus 4 armor for a turn, and I'm willing to spend 2 force to make 1 gauge. So I think that this is good on all fronts. You just have to make sure that when you play it, you have something that will still be a good card to play if they try to swing into you. Um,
Sure, sure.
the most use that I see out of this is situations where I'm in the corner against someone and I want to be able to move out, so I'll boost it, go to here, and then be like, I have plus 4 armor. Spike me if you try. And then
Right, right.
being prepared
Yeah,
for
good
spike.
good luck. I feel like it could also maybe set up, this one for
Werfen
your
Erschlagen.
yeah, for your crazy, I just wanted to make you say it again. For your crazy resource advantage. Because the 4 armor is enough to actually make that, relatively safe.
You'll start winning trades with 4 armor, 4 speed, 4 power. That's a pretty solid stat line, and it makes moves like Werfen Erschlagen safe, yeah. Or
Yeah.
it even makes your specials just now nigh unbreakable. So
Yeah, honestly, yeah, 4 armor on a lot of things makes them kind of unreasonable. Almost anything that is likely to hit, uh, increases your trading potential by a huge amount.
yep, and if, for a card like Wirbelwind, where I'm either gonna move into that range or I'm gonna, you know, cross them up, it's now a 6 power, 4 speed, 5 armor, 2 speed, and
Yeah,
it's
or
not a
2 guard,
2
yeah,
guard.
yeah, yeah, good luck breaking that. Good luck making meaningful progress on Waldstein's health when he has that up. It's not just about breaking the attack, it's all armor.
And you really can't win that because the only thing that trades cleanly is Spike, and you now are faster than Spike because it's a speed 4 move, unless you
Yeah,
have something like that's a special that can break armor. Otherwise, you're going to be beating or trading pretty high up, even if they sweep you. Okay, you have 4 armor, so you'll be taking 2 damage at max if they don't have any boosts, and you'll be hitting them back. It's
right,
just a very good boost. Generally, people don't swing into it. Every time I've
right.
played it, they're just like, "Oh, hey, okay, I'll let that sit. You can have a gauge, no problem." And that's fine for Waldstein. You spent 2 cards,
Yeah,
got a gauge, move forward, didn't get hit for a turn. You're happy.
alright, yep, that makes sense. So it's kind of like, the the inverse of Face Me, where this is saying, like, "You better punch me right now or I'm gonna kill you next turn." This is saying, um, uh,
Punch me if you
"You're
dare.
not gonna yeah, you're not gonna punch me, so I get gauge for free, and I get a reprieve from some aggression for a second."
I get my turn back.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. Alright, so that's the kit then, and it sounds like it's starting to kind of coalesce into a game plan for me. Like we're talking a lot about positioning control. We're talking a lot about just like trading well with your good specials, kind of when to use certain things. Um, in terms of like we talked about a couple like early game plays, like threatening normals with the destroyer at in starting positions and things like that. Um, and then you're you're building up towards either your exceed mode or your ultras, and it sounds like it's you're more likely to be now for you going for the exceed mode.
I've been doing it almost every game now, unless I'm just like steamrolling them on the front side. Then I'm like, okay, cool. Let's hit them with a
Right.
funny special. Why not? Um,
Right. Okay.
in most competitive
So
games that I'm playing, it's a few turns of slapping them around with good calls, good plays, 6 power cards. Because like 3 hits from Waldstein will put you at 12 life. Like you will
right.
be lower than you think against him. And once once he's got a significant life lead, he's just like, all right, let me flip. I can now tank all of your hits and just kill you faster. I'm not going to be broken anymore. You're just going to die in 2 more hits. So you have to really think about evading rather than just trying to trade with him. It just puts him in such a good position to bully your opponent into a corner and drain their
Right.
resources, drain their options, and just start playing the checkmate game of I'm playing attack. It has plus 2 power, plus 2 guard. I win.
and you cannot deal with it
You can hit me back, but I will hit you back for even more.
for harder, and I will convert the resource advantage I have into a life lead and kill you.
Yes.
So that means then on that line of play, this is usually Hecaton Shier. This is usually the destroyers. This is usually maximize power. You're not really, unless there's like a specific very important use case that these altars cover, you're using them as boosts or as force.
Yes. If I'm in a
Um,
game plan where I think that flipping is the way to go, I'm going to be boosting those guys each and every time. Um, And if I have already found like, okay, I've had two situations where I had very good moments to use catastrophe or Werfen Erschlagen, I might just give up on like, all right, I don't think I'm going to exceed this game. I just got to conserve my resources and just kind of keep the best I can. Maybe use them to keep in the range of my opponent instead of trying to flip, or just using them as like you need one force to move without spending a card from your hand, something like that. Um,
right.
really depends on
And
which game plan you have found yourself flowing into.
right, and either one of them is going to kind of require sacrificing the other because you just don't have the resources to sustain both. So
Yeah,
one side is going to have to kind of slacken in order to be able to get pulled on the other side.
pretty much.
Um, and you mentioned Furzenwolf for kind of your force card, the one that you're most likely to be spending as force. In terms of like economic considerations, are there any other cards that so we've got what other sources of gauge and draw do we have? We have maximize power for gauge. Furzenwolf gives you spend as force sometimes. Hecaton Shier is a great hand reload.
Sturmangriff will
Um,
draw you the two on the boost for face
yep,
me.
there you go. Okay, so he's got a decent amount of card draw, but maybe not quite enough. Is most of his resource considerations down to his gauge then?
Uh, Gauge and still cards in hand. Even
He
with
he still does need both even with all that draw?
he does still need both. You really don't want to be dipping down like lower than two cards if you don't have to, unless you have like a really good play. I'm like a very patient Waldstein player. I
Mhm.
used to not like characters I had to spend time preparing with, so I started playing like Enchantress and Ken. And once I realized how to prepare correctly and not just whenever I felt like I'm low on cards, I managed to make Wallstein work a lot better for me by managing like his options, because that is
Right.
his one of his really good strengths, that he has a lot of good options, and if you pick the correct one, the payoff is like a free 6 damage, which is
Right. Right.
backbreaking for certain characters.
Definitely. And so in order to get that gauge, because he has a few ways to consistently hit the opponent, he's got a few gauge generation tools, but it seems like he's just gonna be short of what he wants most of the time, and you
Yeah,
just kind of have to live with that.
you're gonna feel like you just need a little bit more, but you just got to deal with what you got. Like, oh, I have 3 gauge. If I have one more,
Right.
I can comfortably exceed and get 3 attacks off of it. But you might at that point just go like, I don't think that's going to happen. I might just have to spend this gauge on an ultra right now because
Right.
catastrophe is looking real good, and you just have to adapt your game plan to what position you're in, what cards in your hand, and what your opponent has, which is like just basic good card game advice.
Right.
But
Yeah. That's Exceed in general, and I think a lot of these guides come down to play good Exceed through the lens of the kit that we've described.
yes,
So
because
that I think
Waldstein
that
is
that
it's a
tracks.
requirement for him almost. He needs to have
Definitely.
good call outs. He can't really afford to just throw out willy-nilly cards and get broken and lose something like Wirbelwind. I do
Right.
want to talk about wild swinging with him a bit though.
Yeah.
Um,
Please go ahead.
his wild swings generally are pretty good. If you're at range one and like you have Sturmangriff and Eisennagal in your hand and like dive and even sweep. If you're just like, all right, I don't want to use this sweep for whatever reason. I have a lot of options that can hit at range one. Um, Only one of my specials won't hit, and if you already have one of them in hand or already used one, the chances are low. And only like a couple, maybe two normals won't hit. It's worth wild swinging to keep up your hand size and to keep your available options open. Because
Sure.
when the time comes that, like, all right, I know my opponent is a zoner. They're going to try and push me out. I'm playing against Phonon. I hate my life. I got to keep the Sturmangriff to get in eventually, or I'm just going to get zoned out the rest of the game. I gotta keep my Wirbelwind in my hand for that time she's gonna push me all the way across the screen right at range 4, and I need to advance past it. Um,
Right.
so you really need to identify at first what cards are going to win me the matchup on their attacks or boosts, and do I need to spend them right now? Is there a better time? And is wild swinging a safe option for me right now? Obviously, it depends on what's in your discard, what's in your hand, and everything. Uh, but good wild swings with Wallstein will help you preserve your hand size, preserve your available options. Um, so really gotta get good at making attacks without resources with
Right.
Waldstein.
And when you are wild swinging, are you frequently using your ability as well?
Yes, I almost always use my ability. There's very few times where I don't. I played in that previous tournament I mentioned, where Waldstein got banned. I banned my opponent's Arakune because no one wants to play against that. Afterwards, we're like, let's have a fun one where we play our banned characters. Oh my god, Arakune is so specific with his odd even placement.
Yep. Yep.
Sometimes you're like, all right, if I hit with this, it'll push or pull him 3. I think he's going to do this move. If I use my ability, he will be on an even number and hit me no matter what. I have to
Right. I have
really
to
think.
yeah, but most of the time you're you're getting enough benefit out of it. What about when you're wild swinging on this side? Is part of your condition for exceeding with Waldstein in the first place that you have enough resources to not need to wild swing?
Yes, if you're flipping Waldstein to his exceed side, you should have enough cards in your hand. Like should be enough to reasonably batter my opponent into submission.
Right.
If you're wild swinging while spending a gauge, it makes your wild swings more consistent, but you don't know what you might be spending. He doesn't have
Right.
like force specials, so if you just happen to hit like Eisenthal at range 1, you just lose it and it feels bad.
You're just sad. Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely something that I would do and I would consider doing. I probably have at some point. Um, but I would only do that when I have cards that aren't good in my hand and I just want to hit with something like, oh, my hand is block and spike and we're at range 1 and I'm at a decent life lead and I still have, 3 gauge left. Yeah, I'll go for it. Um,
Okay.
but just as a general desperation play, you better really be desperate.
Yeah. That makes sense. Okay. Cool. And then what about uh so like from what I've been hearing, I haven't heard anything that is like that would change the normals um in an incredibly obvious way. Like we talked about how like being able to use your front side ability can turn trades into just wins, like grasp and sweep on front side to dodge a sweep or something. Are there any use cases for the normals that you want to highlight as being particularly important for Waldstein to consider?
Yeah, honestly, not really. The best things are going to be for his abilities sweep and grasp. Those are going to be the
Yep.
main ones that you get the most benefit. Um, Spike, you're playing to stun, so moving them should just be like a tiny little bonus. Like, okay, I can move them a little bit closer to me. I played this card to stun them. Block
Right.
obviously does gets nothing. Focus goes so slow, it's just pulling them in more. Which, if they're at range 2, that's great. Now you're at range 1, but it's not amazing. Cross, you're already retreating 3, so that one extra distance, it's like
Probably, yeah.
good, but not backbreaking. And dive
Right.
hits that range 1, and unfortunately, you have to move past them with your before action, not your hit action to cross
Right.
sides with them to not get hit.
Right.
Um, so
That makes
really,
sense.
with his pusher pull 1, sweep, the fact that you can make it trade favorably with sweeps as long as you have a space to, say if they're
To
here, push them back
to push
to.
them.
Doesn't work if
Right.
you're both at range 3 and they're in the corner. Um,
Right.
and grasp just now makes almost nothing hit.
Right.
You can just launch them all the way across the screen, dodge sweeps, or if it's something like spike, you can still just go, all right, whatever, pull one, pull one, no
Pull
harm,
one
no foul.
again.
Yeah.
Right. Sure. Sure. What about the any particular normal boosts that you get a lot of use out of? I assume from what you were saying, superior for EX attacks, and Veil Off
Yes.
might be pretty valuable.
I
But anything else too,
I do love Veil. I think that's one of the best ones. If you're going for like an aggressive Waldstein game plan, you've gotten a couple hits on them, you're up on life. You really want to be crazy, like, okay, yeah, Veil off, exceed, get that fourth gauge maybe, and now just start pounding your opponent. Like having four
right?
gauge, like 2 or 3 hits in, and now you're just hitting them for 2 extra power and guard every turn. That just might be enough momentum to put them into a bad spot. Um, and focus is a really, really good normal. So you
Right.
really have to determine like, do I want to save this as a defensive option? What do I need to save it for? Drawing one card is good. Wallstein likes that, but if you're gonna be at say range range 5 and you know your opponent's gonna throw a fireball, don't throw out a focus just because like, oh well, at least I'll take 2 less damage to draw a card. It's better to either trade or to exceed or to help you exceed with, because it essentially gives you
Right.
2 gauge.
And in the situation that you just described, just accept the combat loss. Don't play the focus for a little bit of value. Just exceed or play it later, or use the boost on it.
Yeah,
It sounds like.
use it to hit and trade or use it
Right.
to exceed. Don't just use it because it has 2
Right.
armor on it and you draw a card. It's just not that good.
Do you ever like is Wildstein so tight for resources that you would avoid exceeding without veiling off? Like do you ever just spend the gauge to exceed, or do you pretty much always exceed by using veil off?
Try to use Veil off to exceed. If I'm feeling like real crazy and I got 2 focuses and I'm way up, I'll straight up like Veil off next turn, revert, Veil back off.
Veil off again, sure.
Yeah. Um,
Right.
but otherwise, I if you have about 4 gauge in hand and you've spent your some of your ultras for boosts already, I'll spend a gauge for 3 hits. That's totally fine. I
Okay.
wouldn't do it less than having 4 gauge and then spending 1 to flip. Um, the only thing that you will definitely get back is block, um, because you're never going to use your exceed action to block. That would be
Right.
hilarious and silly.
Right.
At
Right.
least on his flip side. Uh, but another thing I now want to bring up: if you are on your flip side and you are some range in your opponent and you attack without spending a gauge, they immediately short circuit and get super confused. It's very funny. Um,
Oh, sure.
like what? Why would he not do that? Is he playing block? Is he psyching me out? Like what's going on? Is he just trying to get like one more gauge for something? It's a very funny mind game, very very niche, but it's just how I like to play and be weird. Um,
Like to mess with your opponent. That makes sense.
yeah, because Waldstein, his a lot of his power is not from like just the raw stats on his cards or ranges or anything. It's like the threat of like, what am I going to hit you with? Can you even trade with it? If you
Where are
pick
you going to
wrong,
wind up at the end of this strike?
yep, you may turn out so badly. Like you'll be down 6 life, 2 cards, and
Right.
you're now missing all your attacks because you've been thrown to the other side of the screen. It's rough and really hard for people to come back from.
Right. So he forces bad decisions by putting that pressure on them.
Yes,
Gotcha.
he is very good at lots of little things like that. He's got gap closers, he's got just big chunky hits, and if you hedge against the wrong one because like, oh, Wallstein's at range 5, he's gonna Sturmangriff me, and then you get psyched out and you waste your option, boom, he's gonna exploit that. If you are someone like Ryu or Ken and you have a repeatable Hadoken that's usually really bad for characters that like to be up a close range, that Wirbelwind is going to set you so far ahead because they can't hit you with it to get it back to their deck. Um,
Right.
so it's very much about smartly using all of his cards and threatening them as much as you can. Hence why I like having a big hand size with Waldstein. The more
Right.
cards I have, the you just might not have an option for what I'm going to play against you, or you'll be
Right.
hesitant to
Right.
play a good option because the chances of me having a good response are so high.
Right. And that means that sometimes you're going to have to bait the options out of your opponent so that you can confirm that they don't have another copy of it so that you can play it later or something.
100%. Yep. That's a
Okay.
perfect one.
That
As
makes
far as
sense.
other boosts go, I have used Just Defense on Sweep before. Not very often, but there will be like the occasional time at the near the end of a game. You don't need sweep. You need 3 armor, and you need to hit
Yeah.
them and just live to the next turn, or hopefully kill them. So
Yep.
outside of its normal good uses, it's there. Uh,
Yeah, but by default, that this is probably just sweep because
it's
sweep is a
sweep,
notably good card. Yep.
and it's super good for Waldstein.
Yep.
As far
Yep.
as grasp goes, I use respect, plenty. I think it's just a good boost in general, and the fact that you can spend 1 card to advance 3, something that Waldstein very much enjoys, and
Yep.
comes in with his theme of like, "Hey, I'm going to draw 2, or you're going to hit me. Pick one."
Yep.
Doesn't
Yep.
give many stats, but it's still just good. And
Right.
cost
And if they're not comfortable swinging for some reason at the time because I don't know, you've
drained all
pulled
their
4 cards out of their
resources.
hand or something. Yeah, you can set up situations by denying them the position that they want that you might be able to sneak in something like a respect.
Yeah, and that because it's got such good economy on it. It's advancing 3 and possibly drawing 2 cards, and you don't
Right.
have to strike either, which is something all of Waldstein's specials make him do at some point or another.
Right. Right. So you can actually play a little bit of neutral and set something up for later.
Exactly.
Okay.
As far as Cross's boost go, Superior is just a good ability. I find it very good on Waldstein specials. The higher speed ones like Wirbelwind, the better, or
Yep.
Catastrophe boosting that up. It's
Yep.
Cross is also just unfortunately a really good card, so that's going to be
Yep.
case by case.
Yep,
Uh,
gotta make the decision there, but if you are gonna use Superior, those are probably gonna be what you're using it on, unless you're
yeah.
using it on, like, EX Assault or something.
I much prefer to just use it on something like Wirbelwind, whose stats are already so high, it just pushes it into not only is this safe, it makes it win. Because now,
Right,
like Wirbelwind, okay, my opponent um grasps me, that's gonna lose to anything. That's just how it is.
right.
But if any fast move that doesn't move you, or if they're just trying to use cross as like a very fast move in the corner to, you know, break you because you're trying to do one, it's very good for that. And it just 7 power. It beats every slow. It beats almost every mid speed except for focus, of course. Nothing breaks
Yep,
focus. Um,
yep,
but it just trades up so well against so many things. You're chunky enough to take anything faster, and you're strong enough to break and win against most things that are slower.
right. Alright, that makes sense. And again, for in Catastrophe, like, a lot of the reasons that you would play an EX Assault, EX Catastrophe
Mhm.
means that you are, breaking focus, catching cross, for a 2 gauge ultra is pretty good.
It's so good. It is
Yeah,
fantastic. Um, Assault is better used when Waldstein's on his front side. If you need an attack that'll close you to, it's very good. And if you can bait your opponent into thinking you're going to hit him with some kind of mid-speed slow, you're like, all right, I'll hit him with an assault. It'll trade, but I'll take advantage, which is good. But a lot of times I'm using his boost, the air dash, while I'm on the
yep,
front side to just better position. When he flips, all of a sudden, like, okay, assault's doing 6 damage. Doesn't break
yep,
sweep, but it's just so much chunkier than you'd think, and it breaks a lot of specials too. I found
yep,
that like a lot
yep,
of specials for characters from all the seasons, they'll like range from 4 to 5 on like a super defensive move. Like the really good ones will have like 6, they'll have a 3 and 3 split or 6 guard or something. But it's
yep,
just a very solid speed 6 or speed 5, power 6, essentially range 3 move. So
yep.
I'd like to save the assaults for when he flips
For
for an
when you're
attack.
flipped to
Yeah,
get, yeah, so, it sounds like kinda anything consistent that doesn't, benefit specifically from his front side ability the way that Grasp does might be better spent trading on his Exceed side.
exactly. He's got very
Okay.
good moves that just
So,
need a little bit of boost.
maybe similar discussion about Dive. You kinda wanna save that for when he's exceeded?
Yes, because all of a sudden now, unless you can do the space one cross up by landing right on the other side of them, you're
Right.
doing 5 damage, which is like fair, but you're losing to sweep in a lot of specials. All of a sudden, it's a 7 power dive. Hold on, that
Yeah.
that I got to
Yeah,
worry about.
that feels pretty good all of a sudden.
But also now that I have remembered that I'm not a complete idiot, and we do have reading on
You have
dive,
reading. Yep.
Got
Reading is always worth playing.
Yes, that is so good, especially when your opponent somehow lets it slip, or you have a good inkling they have, especially like a grasp or something in their hand. Um,
Yep.
that's a good time to start dropping, like, all right, I will make them waste a grasp at range 4, hit them with eyes in the gall. Yeah, I spent 2 cards, but I spent a card of theirs and I gained advantage, so I can just position them a little bit better with this push or pull 1, and you gain advantage. Like, that's really good. It's just very good for making your opponent waste cards that would be threatening to you at some point in the future, or even like soon, while you are advantageously beating it. It's
Yeah, and
so
like
good.
you could have an entire other lesson on how to use reading well. It's a very strong effect. Uh, Dive is a good card. Reading is a very strong boost. It's going to be playstyle and situation dependent, but they're both sounds like they're both very worth using.
Yeah. Now we have reading. I don't believe now we have anything like what's the word? Carry, where you could name
Yep.
a card and discard out of your hand. So
Yep.
you're not able to set up like, oh, let me find this. Let me look at your hand and see what cards. You will still be just making the best educated guess you can. You'll never have perfect
Right.
information unless your opponent somehow reveals it to you.
Right.
Um,
Right.
so do be smart and careful with it. Uh, Waldstein does need you to be pretty precise about most of your targeted decisions.
Right. That makes sense. And then I feel like block and tech hit mostly speak for themselves. You
Yep.
block when you're trying not to die. As you mentioned, though, there's situations where if you're trying to land a Sturmangriff or have set yourself in a position to one, you might just get a free gauge by psyching them out.
Which Waldstein absolutely loves. He loves the free
Yep,
gauge.
yep, definitely. And then you also mentioned that Spike is a good card, but you like playing mix up, and this is
Love
one of the
mix.
times that you might forego using his character ability because this boost is so strong.
It's such a good one. It's so small where it's just, close or retreat
Yeah,
1, set an
a
attack, draw a card.
little bit of positional advantage. Yeah,
Yeah, but on your turn, just having like a free move that replaces itself that your opponent can't react to is really, really good. Especially if they've been setting up for some kind of move. You're like, oh, okay, you're very clearly trying to threaten some um, very powerful fast spike. I'm gonna move the
right.
range 4 and Isengall you, or I'll Warble
Yep.
win you, and even if you hit me with something that hits at this range, it'll miss. And
It might not be what you wanted to hit with either.
yeah, because if I make you
It
make
might
a
not
bad
rather
decision,
exactly, yeah, it might not be what your opponent wanted to hit you with if you move yourself out of the range that they're trying to hold.
it's like, oh man, like I can hit with some range
Right.
4 option, but this was really for my spike,
It was for Spike, yeah.
and then I just
Okay.
block through it, and you go, oh, that's sad.
Right. Yeah, so the light that they put down to make their Spike safe, it kinda gets wasted a little bit.
Yeah,
Okay. And then Spike, you need to threaten it. It's an important card to deal with the slow
yes,
attacks. It seems it he Waldstein has a lot of ways to deal with sweep by pushing it out of range. Focus seems like a little bit tougher. Is Spike kind of one of your focus answers then?
yeah, that's gonna be pretty much the focus answer until you flip and you can start sweeping them for 8, Warble winning, eyes
Right,
in the gall on them for 8.
or just breaking it open. Yeah, that makes
Yeah.
sense.
I will say that Werfen Erschlagen, it does break spike, or not spike, it does break focus
Yep. The
when
ignore
you
armor
use your
effect. Yep.
yeah. When you have +2 power, that's 6 power against 5 guard, it ignores that armor, you will break focus
Yep.
there. So that is something to
Yep.
consider. You always want to be aware of how you can break focus with every character.
Yeah, but with Waldstein, who has so many other answers to sweep and stuff, it sounds like focus especially is going to give him some trouble.
Yeah, that's one of the ones he does not like. He likes moving people, and he likes, you know, chunking them for a lot of damage. And when they're playing a card
Right.
that says take less damage, don't get moved, and draw a card, he's like, "Oh man,
Yeah, he's really
really?"
really sad. So yeah, look for ways to deal with that because your opponent's going to be playing them into you.
Yeah,
Okay.
focus will ruin your day sometimes.
Okay. So it sounds like that is the whole kit. Um any other kind of gameplay tips or considerations that you want to go over? Because I have one more question about counterplay and then I think we can wrap up. But if you've got anything else you want to mention beforehand, please.
Um, Waldstein's opening hand is going to be pretty much bad every single time. The only
Yep.
things that you hit like with at turn one at range, at starting ranges, you can drop an eyes in the gall, but it's speed three and it loses to a lot of specials and also dive. You
Yep.
can dive yourself, which is an absolutely baller maneuver.
Yep.
Sometimes your opponent will just, like, oh, I'll play a sweep, or you can Sturmangriff, which I don't particularly recommend because you're still going to lose to sweep, you're still going to lose to dive, you'll lose to just about everything there. Um,
Right.
so really,
So
I don't like to do rate or turn one attacks with Waldstein. I'm just not that confident in his
right.
ability to trade. The most thing you're going to do is threaten either dive or eyes in the gall, one of
Right.
which loses, trades down with sweep, and one of which completely demolishes it. Um,
Right.
so your opponent does like that's the only one though. It's I'd rather just prepare, be slow. If I can get a Verterbin on turn one, absolutely. I'll turn one Verterbin, move up one or two,
Move
start
in.
getting into
Yeah.
rage, start building up gauge, play patiently.
You also mentioned the destroyers. Your normal boost
Yes,
to scare them from first positions is a good call.
I am a very aggressive mulligan kind of person.
Okay.
If I have like a Werfen Erschlagen in my hand and also say a cross, boom, turn one, I can play this. I'm threatening 5 damage, speed six, turn one. If I have
Yep.
both of these in my first opening hand and like the rest of them aren't that good, I'll start looking for cards like, all right, I can mull three, maybe find a Sturmangriff so I can, close back in. If there's something I do want to stay away from, maybe I'll, you know, hopefully dig for a Wirbelwind. You can get rid of like the Persian Wolves and I don't know, like grass that are going to be useless because you're going to be all the way back here.
Yep.
Honestly, that's always going to be situation dependent, though. Don't do that against a zoner. You will regret
Sure.
that
Sure.
decision.
Yep.
Um, but for someone who is slower, less mobile, and likes to be in range one, it's a very respectable turn one play of, okay, now you have to come to me, and I have all the time in the world to prepare.
Right. Right. And I can hit you with everything in the whole
Anything and
kit, and
everything, yeah.
you're afraid of all of it.
I wouldn't do it unless I had the cross in my hand. It does have the downside of sweep losing to dive, spike losing to dive, dive
Right.
losing to everything. It's it's just so iffy. If they can dive into your face when they know that this is here, they're going to break all of your specials. They
Right.
know that they're
Right.
going to be okay.
Right. Okay. That makes sense.
Um,
Cool.
I think that was it as far as starting hands. Um, Just you know that your Waldstein, your max range on most of your attacks is four, technically five. You're gonna want to exist in the preferred range of one, two, and like two and a half, sometimes three. You have a
Right.
lot of ways to keep yourself in that range of theirs. But this is where you kind of want to be living, unless they are really a range one character, in which case, as far away from them as possible and just smacking them whenever they come close. Make them come
Right.
to you, make them spend the
Ma-
resources. When you're
yep.
against
Makes
zoners,
sense.
you have to spend the resources, and it's not as fun, but it is doable.
Yeah. It's a tougher game, and like this is the range where a lot of normals. This is where mix-ups happen anyway. So you're comfortable brawling if that's
Extremely
your
comfortable, yeah.
preferred range. Yep. All
And
right. That makes sense.
you said you did you have one more question still? You said
Yeah. So the last thing I tend to ask folks on this show is you've just described all of the Waldstein things, and now your opponent, who knows about all of the Waldstein things, is going to do his absolute best, their absolute best, to deny you the Waldstein things. What are they doing to stop you? And then, more importantly, as the Waldstein player, how are you keeping them from derailing your game plan by doing their counterplay?
so against Waldstein, the best thing that you can do is have safe moves that not just trade but completely dodge Waldstein's moves.
Okay.
To make him spend resources and valuable cards on a hit that doesn't do any damage to you is like
And doesn't get him gauge either.
no gauge. Like him
Yeah,
missing an attack is like really bad. It feels terrible, especially if he's had to spend a gauge on his EX side or a specific boost to have it hit. Like missing it is devastating for him. It puts him down on resources and gets him nothing. Um,
right.
so you really want to focus on putting Waldstein in positions where he has to spend more resources than he wants to get into range to hit you. You want him to miss attacks, so less about trading and more of trying to trade leanly. If you can get any free damage on him, make him waste attacks, make him try to wild swing because he doesn't want to spend his cards to, you know, say he got block in his hand. If you throw a Hadouken out, range 5, I'm not going to play that block. It's not going to do me anything. It's going to save me 4 damage, it's going to get me 1 gauge, but block is for surviving and for bluffing. I don't
Right.
particularly like it for that. I might literally just start wild swinging to hopefully get something faster and just at least not spend cards from my hand. Um, I would like to put myself as Wallstein in situations where, say, like, okay, I know that you have certain options that are down. I'm at range 2. This is a 50-50 mix up. If you guess wrong, you are taking 8 damage to the face and it's going to be devastating. It's probably the best that you got is just setting up situations where no matter what, they if they guess wrong, you get massive advantage off of it. You have to take your wins where they come and you have to push them for as much as you can.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like, I mean, he's a grappler, right? It's grappler life. He's never going to have a consistent 100% way to guarantee strikes.
Nope.
He and if he could, he'd be broken because the things he's hitting you with do too much damage.
So much damage. You have to really manage your movement, manage the positioning, manage your resources, know what's worth spending to get into your ranges, know what's not. And that all has to just keep changing every single turn with new information. And it is
Right.
a lot. What I will say for anyone who may want to play Waldstein or any other character that, is reputed to be low power, not that good, not meta, you can do it. I took Waldstein to a tournament last month. I went 6-0. I didn't drop a single game. All my Waldstein games are 2-0s. He's good. Every character can be good. Just some of them rely a lot on fundamentals like Waldstein does. His
Yep.
specials are good. They're not going to carry you without good decision making on your part. And sometimes you are just going to be put into a position where you lose. You're just gonna have a matchup that is so insanely bad, and they got lucky on the first 2 turns, and now you're like 20 life behind. It's gonna happen. That's just part of playing a character that you like.
Yep. No, that makes sense. And to go back again to that disclaimer at the start, Exceed is a fun game. Waldstein is definitely a character that you can play for fun and have a lot of fun.
I have
But
so much fun playing Waldstein.
yeah, and you're playing to win, right? You don't need to choose one or the other. You're you're having fun when you're goofing around with Waldstein. You're having fun when you're playing him in tournament. He's a fun character, but he's also an effective character, and he can be made to work despite you know public opinion about our boy.
Yes, he has the tools to win. You just have to know how to use them, when to use them.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And honestly, like I mean, when you're talking about an off meta pick, this is the kind of character that these guides might be for. Like everybody sort of might know how to fight some of the top tier characters in the game because they get brought up a lot. But Waldstein is somebody who you might go several tournaments without ever seeing,
I
and then
think
you
I'm the
run into
only
Mac.
one who plays them at my
Yeah,
locals.
and then you run into Mac in a tournament, and you don't know what he does, and he eats your soul, and you're very sad. So like this character can do work, especially if you don't know what he's doing. So be wary of him and use that to your advantage if you're playing him.
100%. I get every time like, what does Waldstein do again? I'm like, oh
Yeah,
yeah,
you start rubbing your hands together. Oh, this is gonna be good.
I'm about to teach you something.
All right. Well, I mean, speaking of segues, thank you for teaching me. Uh, that was my all-time great segue. I'm so proud of myself. Thank you so much for your time and for your expertise, Mac. If you have anything else that you want to mention about Waldstein, I think I'm good to wrap up. I've learned what I needed to learn, but I don't want to cut you off or anything.
Oh, no, no, no. I think I've gone over everything that I generally go with Waldstein. Um, Personally, for me, I'm very much like a gut check player. I go by feeling. I do absolutely think about everything that I'm doing math wise, but sometimes when you're playing a character like Waldstein and you just have a feeling, like they're going to play us slow. I feel like this player, when they're in this position, they tend to use safe slow moves. I'm going to
Yep,
hit them with the
you
spike.
gotta.
I'm going to hit
Yep,
them with
you
the Werfen
gotta
Erschlagen.
use your use the vibes against them,
Yes.
basically.
Use the math to
Yep,
back up your gut feelings, and when you hit with them, you will feel like the king of the game. When you miss, you'll feel
perfect.
much worse, but when you
So
hits,
don't
ooh, it hits.
simply don't miss.
Yeah, just
It's
simply
easy.
hit all your moves.
Yeah, just win all the time. It's fine. All
But
right,
yeah, I
Mac.
think that's all I got. Apologies for forgetting that reading exists in this season. I was thinking about Guilty Gear. So redact all of that, but otherwise, I've said everything.
It's all good. It's all good. Uh, everybody makes mistakes, and especially in a game as complicated as complicated as Exceed. So definitely don't worry about that. Um, all right. Well, yeah. So thank you so much for your expertise. I really appreciate it. I really enjoyed talking to you. For everybody watching, thank you for your time and your attention. I hope we didn't go too long. I hope you learned some things. I'd love to hear about your Waldstein experiences. Good luck playing him out there. And I'll see you again for the next one. Goodbye, everybody.